Vel awoke with a start in his stately hotel room, a small but pleasant construction of worked woods, colorful flowers, and hardy green plants. The sweet smell of fresh pollen dominated the living chamber, a succulent scent that was quite pleasant to awaken to, while the morning chill crept through the circular window left open the night before, a small portal of wood encasing transparent mica. Several similar windows facing south allowed the light of morning to fully illuminate the whole of the small chamber, a warm, rich glow, full of energy and life, of truth and hope, of everything the wizard had come to the heavenly country of Sparklewood to find. And Vel couldn't help but smile to be home again. If help for Josephine still existed, Vel knew, he would find it within the realm of the inner circle. The altruistic wizard drew a long, slow breath, and then slowly sat up in his comfortable bed, his heart beginning to pound with anticipation. The bones of the wizard still ached from his magical teleportation to the city only hours before, but Vel was optimistic about his journey to the powerful island nation and simply sat there for several minutes, so content to be within Chris once again. The familiar room felt like an old friend, something he had missed during the last year within Josephine, and the wide variety of memories locked away in his mind left him as warm and cozy as any blanket. Yet the survival of Josephine now rested upon his weary shoulders, and Vel knew his return home would be anything but comfortable. Stepping onto the warm wooden floor below, Vel felt a sudden spasm of pain in his lower back, the direct result of the magical shape-shifting which had spared the life of the Lord of Josephine at the hands of the Benzars the night before. Accepting the pain as every Merrigan wizard must, the circle member removed his nightwear and slowly changed into his official white robes, about to depart the small chamber. Making his way toward the door a few minutes later, Vel glanced around at the beauty of the room one last time and deeply inhaled its flowery perfume before gaining the door and the tiny corridor beyond. Skipping breakfast altogether, Vel soon reached the living streets of the city beyond the inn and began his short journey outdoors, inhaling the clean and invigorating forest air that completely saturated the most important city within America. All about the wizard was magically worked wood, an entire forest carefully nurtured and manipulated to support the many buildings, homes, and streets of Chris within its upper canopy. The whole of the capital established nearly 100 feet above the dense forest floor. Each surface of the city consisted of thick biomass, the trunks and branches purposely grown to add utility to their natural shape and function, allowing the citizens of Chris to enjoy a rich symbiosis with the millions of ancient redwoods that supported Sparklewood. Indeed, Chris was a perfect example of humanity's coexistence with nature, a glorious metaphor that served to enrich the code of the land, and the spectacular sights, sounds, and smells caused Vel to soon forget about the physical pain that burned within. Stepping into the narrow street, his weight supported by thousands of interweaving branches held in place by permanent magica, Vel started toward the Dome of Decisions in the near distance, the great structure rising over the center of the city like a magnificent rainbow on a warm summer's day. Glancing about, the elderly hero felt nothing but warmth and inner peace from the familiar dendrology around him, and he secretly wished the inner circle had not made him representative of Parappa after the unauthorized execution of Sandris within Josephine over a year ago. Still, Vel was home now, at least for a few hours, and the circle member walked with deliberate slowness in order to fully digest the rich splendor of the magnificent city around him. Turning a corner within the maze of woody growth, Val noticed the distant cusp mountains beyond the upper reaches of the canopy far ahead, the range encircling the mighty forest like the great protector it was. Forever laden with snow, the mountains were normally shrouded in thick, glowing mist, a fog said to be the combined lingering energies of thousands of deceased circle members, and the wizard wondered for a moment whether he himself had matured enough, over the course of an entire lifetime, to pass into spirithood upon the death of his mortal body. The incredibly beautiful and enchanting sight of the pristine mountains beyond quickly erased Vel's thoughts of death, however, and the sorcerer dwelled upon the beauty of the land around him. The city had been designed and constructed by Sisla herself as the home for the inner circle, a place to forever represent the love, faith, courage, and dignity shown between a group of honorable leaders and the grateful world controlled by them. Now very close to the Dome of Decisions, Vel turned down another perfect street, the highly respected wizard returning the smiles and compliments of his fellow truistics who happened to pass by. Some of them, recognizing the rainbow sash of the inner circle around Vel's neck and down his chest, respectfully bowed before continuing on their way, while others simply smiled and nodded with approval, further re-energizing Vel with hope and compassion. Soon Vel stood before the great construction itself, a mammoth work of living trees grown along the perimeter of a circular base and sewn together with Sisla's own Majika, its outer surface forming a splendid dome and smooth as any silk. A sappy substance clung to the leaves of each redwood and caught the incoming rays of the sun like millions of tiny raindrops, creating an enormous rainbow effect across the whole of the dome. The spectacular array of light and color appeared like a godly blessing upon the city. The golden statue of Sisla perched upon the very apex of the living statue, as the deity she had become, gracing all those who dwelled beneath her. The base of the dome consisted of several wide, flat entrances located at the four cardinal points, each representing one of the four ages of man. Vel made its way toward the western passage, the Age of Reason, a wide grin across his face with the thought that he would now receive the recognition and support he needed to help save Josephine from the murderous Benzars and the Angel of Death. Traversing woody stairs toward the dome's entrance beyond, Vel stopped to listen to the small choir of highly trained men and women singing just before the grand construction. The musicians sang of contentment, of inner peace, of faith in everything, and Vel nearly wept at the beautiful music, the ritual releasing a wave of warm feelings and memories of better times. Nearly lost within the wondrous song, the aging wizard finally recognized several colleagues standing in the doorway of the building and stepped forward to reach them, thanking the circle representatives repeatedly for their rather surprising decision to meet and finally address the Josephine situation. Greeting each of the ancient men and women with their customary sign of Sisla, a pair of soft pats across the heart followed by the opening of a palm, Vel passed through the western entrance to the Dome of Decisions and into the magnificent structure beyond.
Continue the utopia.
The dome inside towered nearly 50 feet in height, the iridescent clumps of large leaves that formed the walls reflecting an intense ball of golden energy that hovered near the very top of the tremendous building. The amber light refracted off the walls in a series of distinct, ordered patterns, forming entire scenes depicting the rise of Sisla and her victories over the corrupts of the Age of Damnation, of her absolute rule over America, and of the inner circle carrying on the goals and responsibilities of Sisla after her passing into spirithood. The images appeared bright, almost glowing, proud legends embedded within a living matrix of thick branches and redwood leaves, breathtaking work unparalleled since the dawn of the utopia. Yet for all its history and splendor, Val knew the inner circle no longer held the complete trust and faith of the American people, Josephine a particular example, and the wizard couldn't help but wonder whether the Sicilian utopia was truly at an end. Putting the terrible thought aside, Vel followed his allies down the open stairway and quickly reached its edge, an outer circumference that marked a tremendous hole through the floor, a wide pit within the center of the chamber that descended to the very forest floor of Sparklewood. Resting within this circle of nothingness was a round table of solid lifestone, surrounded by dozens of hovering stone seats, the overall setting nearly 30 feet across and suspended by tremendous machete. According to legend, only a truistic, a descendant of the very first inner circle, and therefore possessing the leadership and compassion required to rule an entire world, could reach the seats around the table. Vel summoned a mere pinch of his own immense power to cross the interspatial void, and was the last of his fellow wizards to reach the levitating seats beyond. The meeting about to begin, Val leaned back and made himself comfortable, meeting the stares of his counterparts with well-meaning nods and smiles. Yet the ancient sorcerer couldn't help but feel disappointed with the number of actual wizards present. Each country of Mariga, as created and divided by Sisla so many centuries ago, was supposed to be represented here, but a substantial number of city-states had adopted neutral and even corrupt governments over the last few centuries, and had been subsequently banished from the circle. To make matters worse, Vel soon realized that only half the honorable representatives of the circle were present. Still, he was thankful for the opportunity to at least officially address the circle, and thought nothing more about the missing wizards.
Yes. I'm afraid the inner circle is not what it once was, though many of us would have you think otherwise. No, I'm afraid the decline of this circle is just one more indication of the overall decline of Sisla's utopia.
A strange hush then fell across the seated circle members, and they watched as the regal and extremely ancient Enlightened One slowly hobbled down the northern stairway beyond, crossing the void between the steps and the table seemingly without effort. Perhaps twice as old as Vel, the Enlightened One drew absolute respect from those present, a leader among leaders, and one never to be questioned. The Enlightened One bid the Circle Wizards welcome before seating herself at the exact center of the table. The wizards finally ready, Val stood and promptly initiated his speech, addressing nearly as many empty seats as representatives. My honored fellow Circle members, since the overthrow and unauthorized execution of Sandris over a year ago, I have represented the city-state of Parappa with continued honor and dignity, overseeing their punishment and penance to the Circle. However, as all of you well know, Josephine has been under constant attack for most of that year by Benzar animates, presumably from the Evil Root Forest, and these assaults have grown particularly terrible as of late. It saddens me greatly to inform you that the attack last night nearly destroyed the honorable city and resulted in the loss of its shard of life. Even the enlightened one looked down in despair at the news, for most of the shards were already lost, and the theft from Josephine was truly a terrible blow. Recognizing the bitter disappointment, Vel continued. With the penance of Parappa nearly over, Lord Robert begs your forgiveness and formally requests that decisive help from the Circle be sent to Josephine at once. We were led to believe the shard within Parappa could never be taken, began the truistic governing Sparklewood, the very home of the Inner Circle. How can this be? The Angel of Death is more powerful than even I thought, Vel softly admitted, accepting the blame for the incident. I implore you, Josephine must be helped immediately. We are well aware of the concerns within Josephine, the Pesserden, representing the Penard Forest, answered. The elderly man's skin perfect and forever ageless. But there is a much more serious threat before us, the Gurak forces of Deathwhite. Nearly all of the elderly wizards agreed, almost instantly eroding Vel's tenuous position. I understand that, Vel proceeded with calm defensiveness, but if you don't help Parappa now, another honorable country will fall to corruption. Is that what we want for our world? The Circle members looked to one another with concern, glancing at the empty seats, places that represented countries now possessed by evil and wickedness. The female sorceress from Tain then stood to address the conserved wizards. Our honorable friend Vel no doubt speaks the truth, but nearly all our forces are positioned along the border of southern Deathwhite. Can we perhaps spare a few of these troops for Josephine? No, we cannot, cried the tall wizard representing the kingdom of Sven, who saw everything in terms of black and white. We must do everything we can to stop Deathwhite from advancing south, and Josephine still has one more season to suffer in retribution to the Circle. We must not help them. The citizens of Josephine have paid for their crimes much more than you realize, Vel politely returned, handling the situation with genuine honor and dignity. They understand the power and purpose of the Inner Circle. Let us now help them instead of continuing to hurt them. But they executed a Circle member, shouted the dominating woman from Dreismar, her voice almost shrieking with anger. If we forgive such blatant acts against authority, our power will surely diminish. They must continue to pay for the death of Sandris. And who are we fooling? Vel replied, a hint of sarcasm in his tired voice. All of us hated Sandris anyway, and were overjoyed when the people of Josephine rose against her and had her put to death. Besides, the Sistine Church was much more responsible than the citizens themselves. Heed my words. Josephine has paid for her mistakes. We must now help her. That's not the point, another representative argued, the ancient but handsome wizard from Southland. This is not just a question of right versus wrong, but of law versus chaos. If we help Josephine after their total disregard for the code, for their disrespect for centuries of utopia, then we invite chaos and disaster and deserve to be destroyed. This is a matter of principle, and our convictions must prevail, even at the cost of Parappa's demise.
Sandris, once a member of the Inner Circle and a representative to Parappa. But she was a rebel who greatly abused her power and was put to death by the people of Josephine for having released the Benzars on them a few years ago. I'm afraid she got what she deserved.
Nearly everyone around the massive table applauded the statement, the responsibilities of the Inner Circle seemingly well summarized by the representative's statement. Disheartened, Vel brought a fist violently down upon the table. initiating a speech of his own. With respect, my fellow members, Sisla developed the Inner Circle to serve and protect Mariga, not to let its city-states be crushed one by one. We are here to help all of civilized society, regardless of the situation or its consequences. Is this what we want? To let our entire culture and way of life be destroyed because we're too stubborn to release absolute control? This isn't a question of right or wrong, and it's not a question of law and chaos. It's a question of sheer survival. And right now, our intolerance is killing this world. I beg you, Circle members, to reconsider. We must do what is best for Mariga, even if we don't like it.
They just didn't understand. Society needs structure and law, of course, but their strict intolerance to change, to see the other side of an issue, to do what had to be done. The Circle was formed to protect the Sisterland utopia, but it was slowly strangling it.
The words surprised the liberal and utterly shocked the conservative wizards, initiating a heated debate that drew everyone into the argument. The altercation continued for several long moments, but then was abruptly halted by an incredibly loud and powerful voice, as if Sisla herself was calling down to interrupt the debate. "This bickering is pointless. Cease!" called the ancient enlightened one, her voice amplified by her own powerful magic. "I will have no more of this." The shouting immediately stopped, and the individuals sat back into their seats in fear and embarrassment. Only Vel remained at the edge of his own seat, still prepared to do whatever was necessary to gain help for Josephine, and he watched the enlightened one like a hawk. "Let us consider," the central figure finally announced. The words immediately filled Vel with all the hope and optimism he had carried into the ancient dome, and he eagerly relaxed himself to join the Circle in the ancient ritual. Most of the other Circle wizards reluctantly obeyed the command and made themselves comfortable as well, closing their eyes and taking a deep breath in preparation for one of the most powerful spells the Circle was authorized to use. The truistics slowly began to concentrate, carefully opening the channels of Magicka within their reborn minds in order to shape the mystical energies flowing all around them. Summoning the living energy through their own spirits, soon all of the members were mentally linked together, their thoughts becoming one collective consciousness, one incredible superorganism, their total wisdom multiplied 30 times. As the effort intensified, each wizard straining under the pressure of such powerful and dangerous utilization of Magicka soon caused their power to actually probe the collective consciousness of the entire American continent, tapping into every subconscious intelligence within the known world. The Circle then put forth the question of whether or not the whole of society would best be served by preventing the fall of Josephine. The majority of the minds within the continent possessed no opinion, but many others recognized the importance of keeping Parappa honorable, some even willing to incur personal hardship to save the country from disaster. Clearly, the tremendous Magicka interwoven within the potent spell was demonstrating that the city-state of Parappa did indeed merit special protection, and Vel grinned, satisfied that the whole of Mariga seemed to agree with his plea to help the beleaguered nation.
The arrogant fools. We're supposed to be helping the lands of Mariga, not destroying them. Their own convictions are killing this world.
Then, quite by accident, A single mind within the city of Josephine was found that radiated nearly unlimited corruption, an outlook on life that betrayed utter rebellion and even large-scale murder. As soon as the mind was probed, it purposely put an intense magical wall around itself, preventing even the circle from gaining further insight. But the damage had been done. Someone within the desperate city possessed a terrible secret, something wicked and hollow, and the idea of such an utterly sinister life force dwelling within Josephine struck each circle member like a slap in the face. Unable to learn more about this terrible entity, the circle abandoned their magical effort and soon broke themselves free of the exhaustive spell. "Outrageous!" cried the representative from Muar, another elderly human with quite a temper. "A being of intense evil dwells within Josephine. Fel, how dare you!" "My colleagues, I assure you," began Vel, stunned himself, fully unaware of the terrible life force until now. "I knew nothing of this. I'm as shocked as you. The Circle cannot assist those entities that harbor such rebellious secrets," belted the member from the Cyan Desert. "Clearly Josephine has not learned her lesson and has condemned herself. There must not be help for her now. But Josephine needs us, regardless of what secret she holds," begged Vel, feeling his opportunity slip away. "This unknown enemy can be hunted down and cast into Gemcore. Should thousands of innocent lives be sacrificed because of the corrupt actions of a single individual, we must still do what is best for everyone involved." The representative from Hope Here spoke next, his voice thundering. "Since the time of Sisla, the Inner Circle has acted only on behalf of those countries remaining loyal to the greater good of Mariga, and especially to the Circle. Parappa has already demonstrated her disloyalty to us. Further, Deathwhite's forces are now poised for attack and will utterly destroy the loyal state of the Lonely Plains if we do not send further reinforcements there. We must continue Josephine's punishment for its betrayal of the Circle." Mostly silent but keenly observant throughout the meeting, the Enlightened One finally nodded and addressed her colleagues with her absolute decision. "A terrible entity exists within Parappa and will be addressed by the Circle as soon as the Deathwhite crisis has passed. For now, Josephine has wronged the Circle and must continue her penance, so assistance shall be denied for one more season. Further, until the Circle has fully resolved the matters within Josephine, anyone else providing her with assistance shall be in direct violation of the code, and shall pay with their life for such insolence. The Circle has considered, the Circle has ruled." Stunned by the harsh verdict, Vel frowned and looked away, realizing he had no choice but to obey the wishes of the Circle. Trying desperately to remain silent in the wake of such perceived irresponsibility, however, the altruistic wizard clenched his fists and bit his lip, his whispered voice surprisingly angry and hostile. This decision shames me as a member." Unable to palate the governmental institution any longer, the representative of Parappa turned and left the Great Dome, making no excuse for his behavior as he rushed outside to gather fresh air and clear his thoughts, utterly disgusted with the decision of his fellow governmental leaders.
So, the Circle refused Parappa's plea for help. A wicked and heartless decision. I began to wonder if the Circle was worth serving any longer.
The morning sun blazed a lonely trail across the flat, frozen ice, the pathway bright orange and almost magical in appearance. These lands had been under snow and ice since the Great Destruction, the climate dry and cold, the landscape bare and lifeless, the people abandoned and forgotten. A strong and bitter wind screamed across the Arctic Bay from the north, whipping the tattered remnants of the sparse igloo village scattered across the adjacent snowfield, the cold so burning that few were the days when one could even venture out into the harsh environment. Situated along the far north-central edge of the American continent, this was a terrible, desolate place that promised its banished inhabitants eternal cold, empty stomachs, and premature death. Watching the sunrise from just outside the barren village was Deathwhite, an elderly Gurak and direct descendant of the very first Guraks to arrive here nearly 12 centuries ago. Barely 4 feet in height and quite frail, Deathwhite's dark lavender skin was badly withered by his age in the elements, and his squat features betrayed a painful past, the Gurak consumed with extreme bitterness and hatred. Several layers of gray animal skins hung around Deathwhite, adequately protecting nearly all of his exposed surfaces from the terrible cold. Leaning upon a short cane for support, Deathwhite's physical appearance was the antithesis of might and power, a pathetic icon of pain and misery, one to take pity upon when met for the first time.
I am Deathwhite, an old Gurak of the banished lands, descendant of those defeated, humiliated, rejected, and driven away all those long centuries ago. But I have not forgotten.
An icy blast of Arctic wind suddenly gathered strength just off the coastline as Deathwhite stared ahead, deep in thought. Gaining additional strength as it reached the shore, the bitter air rushed forward like a massive hand to carry the Gurak away, a whirlwind so powerful that the Gurak stood little chance of surviving it, let alone remaining there unaffected. Taking notice of the tremendous blast at nearly the last moment, the bent creature remained unconcerned, simply summoning a tiny pinch of his godlike Majika to act as a buffer from the wind. The lethal gust struck the magical wall and simply rushed around the Gurak, leaving him undaunted and unaffected. Quite used to such violent acts of nature, Deathwhite dissolved the buffer and let go of his magic again, remaining alert enough to protect himself for the next blast of deadly Arctic air. Deathwhite hated this place, despised his entire homeland, and was more determined than ever to free his kind from the imposed exile forced upon them so many centuries ago by Sisla at her first inner circle. Having been exposed to nothing but suffering and death his entire life, he had long ago decided to try and liberate his people, to free them from the bonds of the code, to do whatever he needed to bring the Gurak race back to the level of dominance and power possessed during the Age of Damnation. The Sislan utopia had not been utopia for all, despite the rhetoric of the Circle, and now it was time to bring about a new world order that not only offered the Guraks comfort and hope, but allowed them to reign supreme over all other living beings. Great Father, we await your presence, came a strong voice from behind the Gurak, the voice of a powerful leader respectfully addressing an even more powerful leader. Deathwhite slowly turned to find a younger and more physically adept Gurak standing there, only 10 yards away from a small gray igloo constructed on the outer edge of the barren village. Deathwhite's apprentice was just over 4 feet in height and relatively robust and alive, a soldier well protected by stony armor beneath his own set of furs and skins. Deathwhite nodded, and without further words followed the general into the icy building beyond.
Yes, I am Deathwhite, and my name brings terror to Sizzlins everywhere. And it's their own fault. We've been treated worse than dogs for over 1,000 years. But not for much longer. I swear.
Nearly a dozen Gurak warriors had assembled within the cramped confines of the igloo, each standing around a small, featureless stone table. The generals wore various shades of dark animal skins wrapped around stone armor, and possessed blades of gray marble that hung without containment beside each of them. A meeting of great importance was about to take place, and the warriors immediately stood in sincere respect as Deathwhite gazed upon them, the powerful soldiers willingly under the elderly Gurak's absolute control. "Be seated, my children," Deathwhite whispered, his voice as frail as his small and distorted frame. "Report." "Your homeland is prepared," began one of the generals, never taking his eyes off his feeble leader. "The forces of our homeland, as well as southern Deathwhite, have mobilized as instructed and await your orders along the shores of the Snakefist River. The Guraks of western Deathwhite maintain their allegiance to the Inner Circle and refuse to cooperate." "They choose their own destiny," replied the Gurak leader, his voice barely audible over the cold wind outside. "All that matters is that our people are in position." "Position for what?" asked another of the generals, his voice respectful yet bordering on critical. "Great Father, the Circle has placed massive defenses along the southern shore of the river. An attack there will result in heavy losses for both sides." Deathwhite turned to the arrogant general and fixed his eyes upon him. Narrow, gray, suffering eyes that soon forced the embarrassed warrior to the rear edge of his seat. The Gurak leader then turned to address the whole of the elite group again. "You must have faith, all of you. I have vowed to implement the one purpose, and I shall not fail." "Father," began the same warrior who had just accompanied the extremely old Gurak into the igloo, "we do not doubt you. All of us have seen how you brought our race back to the brink of power, and each of us would gladly die for you, and for the one purpose. We only wish to know what is to happen next." A hint of a smile passed Deathwhite's leathery lips, the closest any of the generals had even seen their leader come to positive emotion. "For 12 centuries, the Inner Circle has repressed us, taken away our rights, our dignity, our destiny to control America. We shall soon have all that again, and more. But for now, I must journey to the Evil Root Forest. I will be back soon. All of your troops must be ready." Not exactly the response they were hoping for. The generals agreed nonetheless, and again stood at attention as the feeble Deathwhite slowly gained his feet and made his way out of the igloo to prepare himself for the long, magical journey ahead.
All will be ours, my children, and quite soon. But first, I must initiate the one purpose, and it all begins within the ruins of Evil Root.
The marshy road eventually led Redfern out of the dark swamp and back into open prairie, the hero now just a few hours from Josephine. The sun high into the late morning sky, Redfern continued to travel along the well-kept road, hiking with his new wooden staff and gently humming a tune he had learned as a young child, a melody taught to him by a mother he had all but forgotten. The gentle prairie air was warm and still and quite pleasant, and with the city so close now, the young wizard found it more and more difficult to contain his mounting joy and excitement, needing to proudly tell his story and finally be recognized as the great wizard he had become. A slight sweat broke out across the adventurer's brow, and Redfern stopped near a small outcropping of exposed stone to refresh himself. A few swallows from his shell canteen cooled Redfern's throat, but quickly drained the container. Out of water, Redfern knew he would be home soon anyway, and decided not to summon more of the liquid. As the young hero prepared to continue, his sensitive ears detected a soft but annoying whine from some distance away, and he looked around for the source of the noise. No skyfly was in sight, no land animal, no creature or natural phenomenon remotely capable of producing such an odd sound could be seen. And as the pitch became ear-splitting, Redfern sensed that the noise was coming from a small depression past a slight ridge in the grassland beyond, and turned in that direction. A deafening explosion then rocked the area, startling the young man with sudden visions of apocalypse. The resulting thunder shook the very ground under his feet and sent the local fauna running desperately for cover. The noise was over almost as soon as it began, however, and Redfern looked up to see thick smoke rising from the depression beyond.
By thunder! What in Sizzla's name was that?
His heart beating quickly from the sudden encounter, the wizard could only wonder, was the noise from a magician practicing his art? Was it some sort of mythical lentimal rising from the ground? Perhaps it was a new type of Delma never observed before by intelligent eyes. Realizing he would never know the truth unless he took a quick look, Redfern cautiously stepped off the path and toward the slight rise in the distance some 50 feet away. Wading through a sea of tall prairie grass, Redfern found a good-sized boulder resting along the outer edge of the depression beyond, providing adequate protection for the curious wizard as he approached the ridge to gaze at the wondrous sight before him. Past the partially buried slab of dark basalt stood an immense valley containing various small plants and hedges scattered throughout the sinewy grasses. But his attention was immediately drawn to the large object resting within the field only 100 feet away. This unnatural structure was unlike anything Redfern had ever seen, and the fact that black smoke was now billowing out of the thing led him to believe that it had just somehow been set on fire. Spherical in shape, but apparently lying on one side, the strange thing was silver, more than 10 feet in diameter, and constructed of some foreign metallic material, the likes of which Redfern never knew existed. Hundreds of tiny, separate areas of color blinked on and off from within the object, virtually all of the lights coming from the upper central area of the sphere. More importantly, someone was sitting within the exact center of the object, although the thick smoke mostly obscured the humanoid for the moment. A flood of possible explanations filled his head, but the feminine scream that suddenly began to echo from the object left Redfern with little time to speculate. Realizing the person beyond was in serious trouble, he leaped away from the boulder and started for the smoking sphere. Another scream was heard, and another, until the shrieks of terror became hysterical, and Redfern knew the woman must be in dire trouble, her very life perhaps depending upon his quick and appropriate action. Nearing the object, the wizard mentally prepared his mind, ready to utilize his new Ajika if necessary. The smoke began to dissipate as Redfern reached the glowing sphere, providing him a much better view of what could only be a Merrigan's spirit trapped within the metallic object. Appearing female and certainly human, the spirit was translucent and eerie to gaze upon, causing the young wizard to stop in his tracks. Redfern knew of the legends regarding the countless spirits of Merriga, metaphysical remains of those who once dwelled upon the world, but he never thought he would ever encounter one. The sight of the spirit was frightening yet strangely beautiful, and Redfern's natural curiosity slowly overcame his inherent fear and instinct to flee the area immediately. The spirit's eyes then met Redfern's, and the screams suddenly ceased. Redfern felt a chill run through him, a terror that consumed him like absolute jealousy, and he again wanted to run, to be miles away. But the confusion and utter bewilderment seen in the spirit's eyes invoked Redfern's deep sense of compassion, a hint of his unknown truistic heritage, and he resisted the urge to flee. The spirit was rather small yet enchantingly beautiful, with shoulder-length golden hair, a childish countenance, and a perfect frame covered by apparel Redfern had never seen before. Perhaps she had died as a young adult, or perhaps as an older adolescent. But this again confused Redfern since, the legend said, only the very old could ever hope to gather enough honor and spiritualism over the course of an entire lifetime to be permanently transformed into such a remarkable being.
Look, she's noticed me. Dear Sizzle, help me, she knows I'm here. But wait, spirits are goodness, so she shouldn't hurt me. She shouldn't hurt me.
The spirit moved toward Redfern, using her legs to carry her but gliding through the bizarre silver object as if it were a mere illusion. The woman was obviously afraid, nervous, and upset, and Redfern felt a wave of pity for the wretched apparition. She then approached Redfern, her body transparent in some places and opaque in others, and within moments the wizard and the spirit stood face to face, gazing deeply into each other's eyes and both shaking in the warm afternoon sun. "Who are you?" Redfern finally asked, his voice unsteady with fear. The spirit opened her own mouth to speak, but the words were garbled and incomprehensible, as if she were speaking the language of the dead. "How can I help you?" Redfern tried again.
She doesn't seem to mean me any harm. And her eyes of fear, eyes of confusion. Something is wrong with her. Something is terribly wrong.
Again, the spirit's reply was totally unintelligible, although the ghostly woman was trying to communicate. Try as he might, Redfern simply couldn't understand the bizarre woman, which seemed to make the spirit even more upset. The specter then reached out to grab Redfern's arm, but her ghostly appendage simply passed through the mortal wizard. Feeling nothing from her reach, Redfern copied the gesture and was able to freely pass through the spirit as well. Another wave of fear passed through the wizard, and Redfern was forced to summon all of his remaining courage just to remain where he stood.
She just
didn't seem to understand me, which was even more strange. Did the passing from mortal to spirit somehow erase the American language from her memory? It certainly seemed so.
The spirit then stepped even closer to Redfern, apparently trying to tell him something. "Alan," she finally uttered, pointing to herself. At first, Redfern didn't understand the gesture. Soon, however, he realized that she was trying to tell him her name, and so he repeated the name, causing the ghost to smile faintly. "How can I help you?" Redfern asked again. The spirit gazed at Redfern and shook her head, unable to communicate with him and perhaps beginning to accept her estranged place in the world.
I didn't know where I was, and we obviously didn't speak the same language. So I kept things simple, beginning with my first name, Ellen.
Recognizing her inability to speak his language, Redfern held out his hand and closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath in preparation for a powerful spell. The wizard searched for the Magica that now embraced him, flowing through him like water down a stream, and concentrated on gathering this energy for his own compassionate purposes. Indeed, Redfern had accomplished this new feat several times now since his unique rebirth nearly a season ago, and so he waited patiently for the energy to transform his intentions into permanent reality. But the Magica failed to materialize. Although he could still feel the energy pulsing through his body, the wizard began to have great difficulty concentrating, and soon he realized that his effort to instill the American common language upon the strange spirit had failed. The hero tried one more time, then let go of his stored breath and opened his eyes, the spirit looking at him as if he had just stood on his head and created several bizarre noises.
No! The Magica. It's not coming. Can't seem to draw enough power. Well, it was a difficult spell anyway. I'll just let it go.
Disappointed that he couldn't magically help the spirit, Redfern glanced back at the metallic object one last time. After a moment, the spirit reached toward the structure and tried to touch a large red light positioned along the outer surface of the sphere, but her hand simply passed through it, and the ghostly woman again cried out in frustration. Realizing he could actually help this time, Redfern hesitantly reached in and touched the red area himself. The colorful lights immediately faded away, surprising Redfern and leaving the large object cold and lifeless. Then it hit Redfern, like a cold slap in the face, as if his deepest morals had just been violated. The woman before him was no genuine spirit, but a victim of this piece of technology, a machine constructed long ago before the Age of Damnation, probably even before the Great Destruction, and somehow missed during the Purge, when Sisla herself led a campaign to eradicate all such forms of technology from the planet. Theorizing that the ghostly woman had found the cursed object and was accidentally transformed into some sort of ghost, Redfern immediately convinced himself that the woman deserved her fate and turned in surprising anger to walk away from both her and the machine.
So that's it! She was playing with something technicky here. She must have found this cursed thing here and played with it. And look what it did to her. Wretched machine. She got what she deserved.
Unable to understand Redfern's sudden contempt for her, the spirit rushed after him before he was even partially back to the road, her fear and agony most evident. Redfern didn't even notice her until she rushed a few feet ahead and put her hands to stop him, nearly passing through him in the process. "Out of my way, fool! You got what you deserved," condemned Redfern, not even slowing down as he passed directly through the spirit. "You broke the code, and now you can suffer for it." The woman didn't appear to understand, however, and attempted to stop the angry wizard several more times. As they reached the road, the antics of the spirit finally made Redfern stop and turn toward her again. "Look, what do you want from me?" snapped Redfern, now wishing he had never encountered the woman. Ellen simply stood there, appearing to be a divine nymph without life or hope. This vision of agony began to chip away at the fortress around Redfern's heart, and his attitude slowly changed from scolder to savior. "Come on, I'll take you to Josephine. Maybe there you can get some help." Although he knew she couldn't understand him, his tone of voice and look of genuine concern conveyed the message, and Ellen bowed her head in recognition of his kind gesture. Redfern then turned and began to follow the path home, now accompanied by this most peculiar companion. Nearly another hour passed before Josephine came into sight. Not a word had been spoken during the short trek, but Redfern was observant enough to notice several humanistic traits regarding the ghostly woman. She seemed to require air. Her senses appeared to operate normally, and her weight left soft imprints upon the ground beneath her feet. But Redfern also wondered if she ate or slept. Did she age? Could she die? As they traveled, the wizard became more and more convinced that supreme magical help was needed for Ellen, and needed as soon as possible.
I'll tell you, she sure was a strange one. The machine she had found must have altered her physically, perhaps even spiritually. I wondered if she'd ever be human again.
Both of them were thus overjoyed when the city finally came into view. The primitive but spectacular metropolis was laid out within the small niche between two mountain ranges to the north and west, providing a natural area of protection few cities were lucky enough to possess. The capital was relatively large, consisting of thousands of stone buildings carved directly out of the bedrock below, each brightly colored and highly decorated. Encircling the city was the wide wall of green vegetation, although its protective barrier had been breached and even destroyed in several obvious places. Remembering the news of the attack from the den where he had encountered a few days earlier, Redfern could plainly see the damage, and the wizard's look of surprise and concern cooled Ellen's initial excitement as well. From their vantage point overlooking the city, they could see several areas of severe destruction and dozens of weary townsfolk still trying to clear the wreckage. Although the great city had somehow repelled the last invasion, Redfern could see the attack had been quite serious, and he was determined to find out exactly what was going on. "Something's terribly wrong," Redfern finally muttered, not caring that Ellen couldn't understand him. The wizard then motioned for the translucent woman to follow, intent on reaching the city as soon as possible. Under the bright noon sun, the walk to the blasted city gate was quick and silent, although hundreds of grim speculations passed through the mind of the wizard during the short trek. Soon the couple was standing before the ruins of the main gate, which had been destroyed by magical fire several nights before and was undergoing the arduous process of being rebuilt. Peering past the stone remains and the vegetative wall leading away to his left, or to his right and left, Redfern saw little activity in the streets beyond, though angry shouts could be heard from far in the distance. Inspecting the damage done to the gate and adjacent walls, Redfern and Ellen were then startled by a gruff voice from beyond. "Halt, strangers!" Peering down from the remains of the partially destroyed guardhouse was a rather old captain of the city, his face worn and beaten by years of suffering and combat. As if indicting the two travelers on the spot, the captain continued his query. "Who are you? Why have you come to Josephine?" The captain wore a regal version of bandaroot armor, consisting of interwoven plant rooting systems and hundreds of small beads threaded to create some sort of image. Under the guard's head rested a bandaroot cap, stained with red and white and adorned with several long feathers. Redfern recognized the uniform of the Josephine officer and quickly replied, "My name is Redfern, and I'm returning from Mount Rebirth with this woman here, a victim of something technicky." The captain, wary and quite suspicious, turned to Ellen, his reply rude and untrusting. "Found a spirit! What does she want with the likes of us?" "She's not a spirit, just a victim, like I said," Redfern returned, in no mood to argue. "Now, let us by so we can get some help." "Wait here," responded the captain, disappearing into the damaged guardhouse and leaving Redfern and Ellen temporarily alone. The ghostly woman looked at the wizard with surprise, demonstrating her complete lack of understanding of where she was or what was going on. Recognizing this, Redfern shrugged and gently smiled, turning back toward the city entrance to await the return of the suspicious guard captain.
I wonder what they're talking about. They don't seem to like one another. I hope my new friend here isn't getting us both into trouble.
Several minutes passed and Redfern began to wonder if the guards had forgotten about them, so he stepped forward to take a better look at the city's interior. There was still quite a bit of rubble and decaying plant tissue where the main gate had been blasted just 3 days earlier, and past the gateway were several stone walls that were also blackened and bloodied. But beyond the initial damage was a much more pleasant view. The city as a whole appeared as a brilliant rainbow, dominated with vibrant green grass, red and brown walls of carefully crafted stone, orange bricks of stone marking the roads of the city, and a flawless blue sky enhancing the brilliant variety of spectrum colors. The patterns and color of the city had always impressed Redfern, even as a child, and he again felt an enriching warmness at the sight of his wonderful birthplace. A smile graced the lips of Redfern. Home at last.
Well, despite the Benzars, despite everything, it is good to be back. It is good to be home. Soon I'll announce my return to the city and put my new powers to work for the good of Josephine.
Then out of nowhere rushed 3 guards, dressed like the captain above, but not quite as colorful or impressive. Redfern spotted them only as a blur just before he was tackled and pinned to the ground. A fist landed deep in the wizard's unprotected belly, nearly knocking the wind out of him, and then the guards grabbed his arms and stood him back up to his feet. Trying to recover from the vicious attack, all Redfern could do was struggle as one of the guards pulled out a Chica cord and quickly fastened it around the wizard's hands behind his back. Redfern felt the magica of the cord flow through and around him, rendering him incapable of calling forth his own living power. Upset that her new friend had just been attacked, Ellen tried to intervene, but she simply passed through the guards, unable to affect them in the slightest, and causing the captain to laugh loudly. "It seems the spirit isn't much help, huh, Redfern? You were a fool to come back."
Magicka cord tied around me. Can't summon my own Magicka. I'm trapped. What is going on?
Redfern looked up with intense anger and revulsion, at a complete loss for his sudden rough treatment. "Good work, men. There'll be promotions for us all," barked the captain as he stepped to within inches of the wizard. "Take them both to the holding cells. I'll inform Lord Robert personally." "By thunder, what is going on here?" demanded Redfern, his anger and confusion quite apparent. "Shut up, Redfern. You're getting what you deserve," came the cold reply from one of the guards as he and his two comrades escorted the wizard into the city beyond, the wizard unable to prevent his capture. Watching her friend being taken away, Ellen jumped to Redfern's side, unable to help but needing to stay with him. The five then entered the city and soon disappeared, the crusty captain grinning as he made his own way toward the magnificent red tower in the distance, intent upon announcing Redfern's return and collecting the modest reward sought for the arrest of the renegade wizard.